Hey, Husker fans, Sam McKewon with the Omaha World-Herald, omaha.com, and huskerextra.com. This is the three keys to Nebraska-Michigan State. Well, it's a big game, right? You think Oklahoma-Nebraska was a big game, and it was in a sense, but this one's really big. If Nebraska wants to have any factor in the Big Ten West race, they pretty much got to win at Michigan State. They've already lost to what may be the worst team in the Big Ten, Illinois. And Michigan State, although much better than I think anybody anticipated, is a game that Nebraska's pretty much got to get, because I would say that Michigan State is the second easiest of Nebraska's crossover games, maybe the easiest of the crossover games with the Big Ten East. They still have Michigan and Ohio State to go, and if you're thinking about Nebraska trying to contend in its own division, they got to win this weekend. It's kind of a game where you're watching, too, to see if this program has really grown from its loss at Illinois. We saw some growth against Oklahoma, but you got to carry that over to a win. As Deontay Williams said earlier this week, we're tired of coming close, right? It takes a toll on you. We want some victories, and I think that's where Nebraska's mindset's going to be. Night game in East Lansing, 7 p.m. local start, 6 p.m. here Central. They should have a really good crowd. I've been to Michigan State Spartan Stadium a couple of times. Underrated venue, loud, difficult to play in. The fans are packed in tight. People might be surprised that it's probably a harder place to play in than Michigan, where it's kind of a wine and cheese crowd and they're very spread out. So they're probably going to have a really good crowd because they're undefeated. And Mel Tucker has asked them to go to the woodshed, whatever he means by that. And so he'll be there, and their team will be there, and there'll be a lot of fans there. So Nebraska's going to be in a hostile spot. All right, three keys to how Nebraska wins this game. Well, first of all, they need to score in a big game for once. They got to score first in a big game for once. They didn't score first against Oklahoma. They didn't score first against Illinois because it was a safety, a bizarre safety, right? They didn't score first against Minnesota last year. They did score first against Ohio State last year, but they ended up losing 52-17. But the first score was good. That was encouraging. They didn't score first against Northwestern. They didn't score first against Illinois. So they've had issues scoring first in games. Being able to stake themselves to a lead. As close as you might have thought Nebraska was to Oklahoma last week, guess what? They didn't lead one time. And after Oklahoma went up 7-0, Nebraska never tied them. Oklahoma led for the last 50-some minutes of the game. So it's a concern in that front. Nebraska's got to get on the board early, get ahead of Michigan State, which has had two long touchdowns early in this season in two of its games. So they've done a good job of getting out in front really quickly. So Nebraska's got to get on the board. If they win the coin toss this week, I think you might just take the football and try to go down and score right away. I don't know if they'll do that. They may defer it and give it to the defense and hope the defense can make a stop. But I would want to put points on the board early against Michigan State. Try to take a little bit of energy out of that crowd. If that crowd gets a 10-0 lead, it's going to be harder and harder for Nebraska to come out back. So that's the first key. Try to score early. Have some good plays in your pocket for that first script. Second key, well, it's Kenneth Walker III, but watch the cutback, right? So Walker is a good running back. I like his game quite a bit. He's tough, he's physical, and he breaks tackles at the second level. Here's the big thing here. He does a good job of what you call pressing the front side of a hole and being able to cut back with change of direction. When you move one side of the hole, what you're trying to do is you're trying to get the linebackers to kind of flow with you, and then once they flow, somebody overruns, and then there's a cutback lane. He does a really nice job with that. Michigan State kind of has a zone style, and so what they'll do is they'll press the front side of the hole, press it, press it, press it. If there's not a leak on that side of the hole, what you're looking for is a gap on the backside. And what a lot of big runs that Walker's had, he's taken advantage of that backside gap. He's done a really nice job of keeping that option open by not sort of closing up his body. He does a great job of changing direction. So Nebraska's got to close in on that. I think they've done a pretty good job of closing the front side of zone-style schemes over the years. They've done a pretty good job, for example, against Iowa. They've closed those pretty well. Where Iowa's done a nice job is Iowa at times will get a cutback. They got one with Tyler Goodson a couple years ago, you remember, in the 2019 game. That's where Kenneth Walker's good. I think Goodson is a reasonable comparison to Walker. I think Walker's actually a little bit better than Tyler Goodson, but watch that cutback run, because I think Nebraska's going to do a nice job of making the front side kind of ugly, so he's going to try to look backside. The great thing about guys that like to cut back is if it's not there, they're going to lose 2 or 3 yards, because the minute that you kind of stop your momentum toward the front side of that play and you try to go back the other way, if you've got it swarmed, you're getting them for a 2 or 3 yard loss. The downside of it is if you don't close that and that gap's there, that guy could run for a long way. So Kenneth Walker's going to try those cutback lanes. Nebraska's going to have to close those cutback lanes, and they're also going to have to close the front side. They've struggled at times with Minnesota on that issue. When you look at the third key, protect the ball. Okay, obviously, right? This is obvious. The reality is Michigan State's done a nice job of taking the ball away early in this season. Miami's quarterback, De'Aaron King, who I got to tell you, I think he's a pretty good player. I think he's somewhat comparable to Adrian Martinez in skill set. He's shorter than Martinez, maybe a little bit better thrower, but they got 4 turnovers off him last week. And part of the reason they did that is because Michigan State was able to make Miami sort of one-dimensional, where they kind of just relied on King to make plays. And he made a few, but he also made mistakes. He turned the ball over that many times. Nebraska's got to watch that with Adrian Martinez in this game. Michigan State's going to give up some yards. I think they're comfortable with that. What they do is they take the ball away. They do a nice job of creating turnovers. Go back to 2019, Colorado. Mel Tucker's defense at CU. What happened in that game? Adrian Martinez committed some really costly turnovers in that game. Now, you can say, well, I don't know, but that wasn't maybe the reason they lost the game, but there was a couple early plays in that first half where Martinez kind of gave it away, and then he threw the interception late. So there have been moments, right, where Mel Tucker defense has had success against Adrian Martinez, and I think they're going to try to turn him over again on Saturday. Nebraska's really got to protect the ball. Those running backs, Ramir Johnson, Marquise Stepp, Sevion Morrison, maybe Jaquez Yant, they got to protect the ball too. I think if Nebraska ends up -2 in the turnover margin in this game, look for a 10 to 14 point loss. It would be great if they were +2. If they're +2, I'd say they're going to win it. If they're +1, if it's 0, I give the edge to Michigan State. Somewhere in there, Nebraska's got to get a couple of breaks, intercept Peyton Thorne, or pluck a fumble away from Kenneth Walker. Will they do it? I don't know. I think it's going to be a pretty tight and exciting game. I anticipate it being close. I anticipate it going into the fourth quarter, and I anticipate whoever's able to establish their run game better is going to have an edge. I kind of like Nebraska in this game, but at the same time, it's going to be tough if Nebraska gets behind by a bunch early. They've got to score early. They've got to try to control the game from the start. If they do that, I think they're going to come home with a win and playing Northwestern in the homecoming game. All right, that's the 3 keys for this week for Nebraska-Michigan State. I'm Sam McKewo'n with the Omaha World-Herald, omaha.com, and huskerextra.com. Thanks.